Okay. This is, I wanted to introduce Alberto Abadie, professor of economics at MIT. And today we're just going to have a short discussion about economics, econometrics, and his work. But before we start, I was wondering, what is the correct way to pronounce your last name, and what is the worst pronunciation you've ever heard?
I won't go into the worst pronunciation. I am very flexible and non-dogmatic about how to pronounce my name.
Yeah,
it's a French name.
Oh.
I am originally from Spain, and I live in the United States. So at least there are like 3 correct ways to pronounce it in 3 different languages. But people say usually Abadie or Abadie, and in Spanish, like originally, we say Abadie.
Abadie. Okay.
Not with the different like it's Abadie.
Oh, Abadie. Okay.
So with the accent on the I.
Abadie. I've been saying Abadie for like 10 years, and then so I got close. So Abadie.
The good thing about my name is that people pronounce it in different ways, but I can recognize all of them very easily. So that's all that matters.
That's all that matters. Okay, so you can in a crowded room, you know that it's.
I know whether they are talking about me. Yes, exactly.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, I have a couple of questions, and so I wanted to start. I was curious about what brought you into economics and econometrics, especially. What was it that drew you to those subjects?
What brought me into economics? Okay, so when as I said before, I am from Spain. College in Spain is a little bit different than in the United States. You go to college and you go directly into a department. I mean, you go to college and you study there, economics or a law or something some very specific subject. And when I graduated from high school, I told my family that I wanted to study physics. And my father said, no way, you are not studying physics, because if you do that, the only thing that you will be able to do in life is being a college professor. Mm-hmm. So I changed to economics, and and I finally became a college professor. So that's and one of the reasons I changed to economics is I thought it was a lot of interesting questions that I knew nothing about and I wanted to know. And there was a little bit of a natural experiment involved in there. Is that the Department of Economics of the University of Basque Country was basically 5 minutes. It is basically 5 minutes away from where my family lives. So it was very convenient for me. And again, a set of topics that I found intriguing, and that's how I started. And in terms of econometrics, when I was in college, I was studying quite a lot of theory, but there was an specialization within the the college degree of economics. So there was my mathematical economics and quantitative methods, and there I was quite exposed to statistics and economics and statistics and econometrics, and that kind of case when I found that part of the discipline very appealing, and I decided to concentrate on that.
Yeah, that's great. That's neat. Did you say that the university in is it Basque country? Is that how you?
That is the University of Basque Country in Bilbao. Okay. I went for college.
You went for college. So was the terrorist attack in Basque country while you were in college? When was that?
Oh yeah, since I was very little,
very little.
Terrorism in the Basque Country kind of started around the time I was born, and lasted until some years ago, and so there was kind of a long process that luckily now it's over.
So it was concentrated in Basque. It was concentrated there.
Was mostly concentrated in Basque Country. Apart from terrorism, there was extortion to some entrepreneurs and so on, in order to finance the terrorist activities of the organization. And there was also terrorism in other parts of the country. Yeah. And most of it happens during the transition, the political transition of Spain. Until until I was kind of a 6 or 7, Spain was a dictatorship. It's difficult to believe that now, but it was. And there was a long process of political transition to democracy that was very successful, but it was also very painful for many people. And this happened as a part of that in part. I mean the terrorist activity.
So I'm curious about that, both because of its history and in your life, but also it seems like it's so intimately connected with the creation of that synthetic control paper. I just am curious, how did that paper come about? I wrote down just a couple of things that it has, that paper, that synthetic control model. It has so many elements from the counterfactual tradition that I sort of associate with you a lot: matching, weighting, aggregating, important treatment parameters using weights, imputation of counterfactuals, difference and differences. And you did it almost immediately after you graduated. And I was just wondering what's the story of that paper, and how did you end up doing that? What was the reason for it?
So the story of that paper, I was as I said, there was a terrorist conflict in the Basque Country, and there was like many people talking about in the newspapers and like in the streets, like talking about what is the effect of terrorism on the economic prosperity in the Basque Country. And shortly after graduating, like I was invited to give a course in my alma mater in the undergraduate level in the University of the Basque Country. I was invited by Javier Gardezábal. And while I was teaching this course, like we started talking about collaborating in these projects and measuring the effect of terrorism in the Basque Country. And at the time was a purely empirical paper, and we were, it was a very, very personal interest in trying to measure, something that, it was important for us. And the thing is that when we tried to do it, we realized that the available methods, were not going to be, appropriate in that setting because of the aggregate level of the event or intervention that we were talking about, that is this terrorism conflict, and also because the Basque Country is a relatively idiosyncratic region within Spain. I mean, we couldn't think about any good match for that, and that's how it came to life. And what we realized later, is that it has many other applications in many other fields, and for many other questions, and has become popular, I think, in part because of the transparency of the methods and because of the interpretability. But also because many of the policy interventions and events that we care about are in fact at the aggregate level, and the tools that we have for policy evaluation were constructed with the idea that we have a big sample of units, and some of the units are exposed to the intervention of interest, many of them, and some are not, and we are going to compare them. And we have much less of a a theory and a conceptual framework for the case in which the policy interventions are implemented at an aggregate level and affect only a few units. But the fact is that many of the policy interventions that we care about are like that. And that's why I think that this set of methods, and including inference, synthetic controls, and so on, they are going through a a very popular phase, because people realize that there are a lot of potential applications and implications.
Right. So in that Basque Country paper, was it, so when when I'm thinking about you guys writing that paper, was it sort of very long into the paper where the project, where you started to realize you needed to construct this new estimator, or was it something you had an idea for it even before the project?
No, it was completely inspired by the project. and it's something that happened very, very early in the process, if I remember correctly. In the same paper, we also have like like a second part of the paper in which we run an event study to try to think about the another way to measure the effect of terrorism in the Basque Country, and that took a little bit longer time to do because of the data availability issues and how to think. Also we have to think very carefully about how you do an event study for a case in which the effect of the treatment is not immediate, but it may happen like like over a long period of time. And how to measure risk in that case.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you don't. That I have a paper like that with fracking, and fracking had the same kind of feature, which was this. It wasn't really clear. It wasn't like a discrete thing. It was sort of slow. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, did you get the impression early on that this might be a big as impactful on practice as it's become? Did you get a sense of that at any point? Or rather, let me say this: when did you get a sense that it was impactful on practice?
I think from the beginning we have the idea that this could be impactful and could be applied to many other questions. I was at the time, however, involved in many other projects that require my attention. So it took me a while to go back to this and think about it in a way that can we frame it in such a way that people could use this type of methods for other applications. And this happened in a paper in JASA with Jens Heimmuller and Alexis Diamond, and we did have like an idea that this could be applied in other contexts. We were of course very, very happy to see how people took on that idea and develop in many different directions, and again it's part maybe some methodological appeal that the methods have, but also is it's the issue of that there are many possible applications out there, and we didn't have much methodology for this type of applications with aggregate interventions.
One of the things that I don't know if this is controversial or obvious, I don't know which it is, but one of the things that I saw is making it really impactful is when you guys published that 2010 JASA, you also made available Stata in R code. And I've always kind of felt like without the software, there's this huge firewall between econometrics and applied practice. You even see that lately with this difference in differences revolution of until people had software in hand, they didn't, because of the specialization and comparative advantage, a lot of applied people just don't feel confident in writing their own code. And so I've always felt like that was one thing that, even with your semi-parametric diff and diff, there's that ABS DID software that accompanied it. Do you feel like it's something, do you feel like that's overstated, or do you think it's important that this software ends up being created out there? Is that a distraction?
I think that generally it's important to have a software available, reduce the barriers to entry on all these kind of technologies or methods, and also avoid the inefficiency that each researcher has to cook her or his own code that may not be validated. So I think that in general is something that is important, and I think that econometricians are now well aware of this, and you see nowadays many more people when they propose a method or a variant of a method or something like that, they see them providing a code in sometimes in like languages that are very popular among like empirical researchers, and that didn't happen in the past so much. But I think like everybody's like now aware that this is very important.
Yeah. I felt like I noticed that with your treatment effects paper with hetoimbins. I remember in grad school getting our hands on, what was it called? It was like it was like in match, I think was maybe what it was called or something like that. And I remember it was one of the very first times that I felt like I was learning new methods and software was available, as opposed to in Stata, we would just kind of work with a lot of in-house. I don't know. It always felt a little different. That I remember just seeing that, and maybe that's always been true, but it was interesting. So let me ask you this: so changing a little bit, Angerst and Pischke call this thing the credibility revolution, which to me, I always struggle to figure out, what exactly is that. And so lately I've been thinking it's design-based identification rooted in the potential outcomes tradition, but I don't know if that's even very helpful. So I just wanted to ask you, how do you see yourself in relationship to that thing that Angerst and Pischke are talking about, and what do you think its lasting legacy is going to be for science, and where do you see it going?
Okay, let me start perhaps with the lasting legacy that is a little bit related to what the credibility revolution is about, at least from my point of view. From my point of view is, a shift of a focus, like people paying much attention in, like explaining what type of variation, exactly what type of variation they are using to identify, the parameters that they are identifying. And this is something that, was somehow like also present in previous research, but, it was much less central to what people were doing. And like in many, like models that like researchers were estimated empirically, it was not clear exactly what type of variation was identifying the parameters of interest. And I think that will be the big legacy of the credibility revolution. When you go now to a seminar in empirical economics, like this is what people talk about. Right. And something that is important to realize and like to highlight the contribution of the recent Nobel Prize winners is that that was not the case. I mean, like people may think that it was always the case, that the scientific discourse in economics has been like that, but it was not like that. It was kind of the opposite of that. And and there were a minority of people like thinking in these terms. And the other day, like talking like with the startup flow about this, like we were joking that like the credibility revolution had a gorilla, like they have the insurgents, right? And like it was the time in which you will send a paper to a journal and it will come back with a comment saying like no, don't use the word causal. Causal is very loaded term. You have to erase every appearance of this word from your paper. So like like a lot has changed, and I think that for the best. And like, and there are like many other traditions in economics that do not use this framework, but I think that having this tradition in economics using this framework, which by the way has become quite dominant, it is good for everybody. Yeah. And yeah, I think that like in the way I asked the second question was about how do I see myself within this tradition. Like well, like I mentioned this conversation that I had with Esther, that she felt that way. And like we were right there fighting in the trenches, and we have been so happy for this to be recognized like recently, like in the Nobel Prize to Dave, Josh, and Guido. And the third question is where we are going.
Where does it go? Where do you think all this is going?
So something I've been telling people, everybody who wants to listen, is that the nature of data in economics is changing. Like and for many years, like economists used to rely on survey data, something like the PSID or the CPS, the current population survey, the panel study of income dynamics.
Mhm.
Then there was a big shift towards like administrative data and
Right.
experimental data that produce a lot of like interesting contributions. But if you think about what's going on now, is like much of the most interesting data for the social sciences, in fact, they are collected by automated systems, right? Like how people relate, with themselves and with others, and with the environment through, internet and other automated systems. And this is quite interesting. I mean, it's a new frontier because we have like a huge amounts of data on what people do and how relate. We have the capacity, the ability of analyzing this data in real time. And moreover, we have the ability of using these like automated systems that are collecting the data to implement, sophisticated policy interventions in real time.
Right.
So like I think that much of what is going to be interesting in the next decades is going to be about how to exploit this like a type of data that people are called big data, but the most interesting thing about this big data is that it's big.
Yeah.
The more interesting thing is like as I said before, the ability to analyze it in real time and like provide interventions, perhaps personalized interventions in real time. I think this is going to be a fascinating issue in the future, in the realm of causal inference.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Let's see. I have one more question. What are the topics in research that you're most passionate about now, even if you haven't worked on it? What are the things that you're most passionate about?
I think this is like kids. You love oral kids, but you love your kids with passion, right? And like I love with passion the things that I've been working on. Like I devoted quite a lot of effort and energy and sleepless nights to those. Like and that's the things I like. I like causal inference very much for many reasons, because it combines like a beautiful conceptual frameworks, like interesting theory, and it's like it has like direct policy implications of many things that you do in that area. Like it connects economics with many other fields, like political science, like epidemiology. Like I talk to many people who are like outside economics, but now we speak the same language in many ways, and it's amazing like the intellectual community that we have in causal inference is, I think, is I cannot imagine like working in like anything else right now. And lately I interact very much with people in computer science, and they tell me like the credibility revolution that you mentioned before that we experience in economics and this social science is coming to computer science. People have been like very much concentrating in like machine learning type of methods that to a large extent are seen as black boxes. And now they are thinking very hard about like interpretability and causality and many issues that are like very important in econometrics.
Yeah. I thought that same thing too. It seems I know this term Lucas critique gets overused, but I've often thought it's got to be within the machine learning community that's sort of collapsed causality with prediction. It's got to be coming that they're going to begin to see their own trying to disentangle the two. And the causal inference tradition in the social sciences seems like a great way, especially with people like Athien Embens and others trying to make that bridge easier, for.
Yes, that is important. Also in computer science, like I always make the joke that they already know. I mean, like these automated systems that we were talking about before, they made it happen, and they know how to make those. But then suddenly they have realized that those automatic systems interact with people who interact with other people,
Right.
and this social science component what they do, they are trying to learn much more about that. So they are also reaching out to economics, to political science, to statistics, causal inference. And recently we have a speaker at MIT, from computer science, and he was telling our students, if you're interested in causal inference, come to us. I mean, we have so many problems that have to do with social sciences that we are really interested about.
Right. Wow, that's cool. Well, I don't want to take up any more of your time, but I just wanted to say thank you for letting me interview you. And just to say again, I'm going to say this in my Substack, but I think you're one of the most creative econometricians I've ever had the pleasure of sort of observing, and it's really neat to get to talk to you up close. So I'll end this now, but thank you for talking to me.
Thank you, Scott. I have to probably not remind you, but say that also is causal inference the reason I know you, because we met many years ago in a course on causal inference at Northwestern University.
Yeah.
And I have been, following your work, and which is of great quality, and very happy to read your book that I think many people are enjoying, and thank you very much for having me here.
Yeah, thank you, Alberto.